I've created a blank page in the exercises site, and in this lesson I'm going to show you how to create a simple HTML table and populate it with data. Tables provide a regular structure of rows and columns similar to a spreadsheet, but for many years designers hijacked them for page layout. Using tables for layout these days is generally frowned on because it causes severe accessibility problems for the blind and other disabilities. So without further ado, let's create a table. To do so, go to the Insert menu and select Table. There's also a keyboard shortcut, Ctrl-Alt-T on Windows, Command-Option-T on a Mac. And that opens the Table dialog box. The first thing you need to do is to set the number of rows and columns. It doesn't matter if you don't know exactly how many rows and columns you're going to need, because you can amend this later. But I'm going to have 5 rows and 3 columns. Next, table width. You can set this using pixels or percent, but generally these days it's a good idea to just delete that value there altogether, because tables expand and contract to accommodate their content. Next is border thickness, which is set to 1 pixel. In HTML5 you can either have 1 pixel or nothing. The problem with border thickness is that it sets the border around each single cell and around the whole table. These days it's much better controlled with CSS, but I'm going to leave that 1 pixel in there to show you what the default border looks like. Cell padding and cell spacing, you should ignore those. In HTML5 they are no longer used. The header option determines where header cells are in your table. Here none is selected, so there'll be no header cells. If you select left, the first column on the left will be header cells. If you select top, the top row will be header cells, and if you select both, you get header cells down the first column and along the top. That's what I'm going to select. Next we've got caption. The caption normally appears above the table, but using CSS you can also put it below. If you forget to put a caption in here, you have to go into the HTML code afterwards to insert a caption, because there's no other way to do it in Dreamweaver. So I'm going to add a caption of sales results. And the summary field, that is also obsolete. It's no longer used in HTML5. In older versions of HTML, summary was intended to be for accessibility. It wasn't actually displayed in the browser, but was there to be read by screen readers for the blind. The recommendation these days is to make the table simpler and to use a caption. So when you're happy with your settings, just click OK. And that inserts a table. Because it has no width, all the cells are squashed up. So to make it easier to work with it, you can right-click the table and then from the context menu, Table and Expanded Tables Mode. And this is just a device within Dreamweaver that makes it easier to insert content into the table cells. So let's start typing in the table cells. Now you can see that as I'm typing, the columns are expanding. That's the way that tables work. They expand and contract depending on the content that's in them. And you can move from cell to cell by pressing the Tab key. Because I set header to both, the content in the top row is displayed as a table header cell, a TH cell. If we go into split view, you can see they're TH cells. And by default, browsers display these with the text centered and in bold font. So if I press Tab, I move into the next row and can start typing again. This is also a header cell, so it's going to be in bold. But the next one is an ordinary table cell, a TD cell, and that is not in bold and it's left aligned. Because each column has now got some content, I can exit Expanded Tables Mode by clicking Exit in this black bar at the top here. And you now see the size that the table will be. So let's continue. Now I won't waste your time by filling in all the rest of the table. I just want to point out a few things. The caption is at the top. It's actually straight after the opening table tag, and even if you want the caption at the bottom, it must remain in this position. It's CSS that determines whether the caption is on the top or the bottom. If you set the headers in the table dialog box, Dreamweaver inserts the scope attribute, which indicates whether a header refers to a column or whether it refers to a row. If you forget to set the headers in the table dialog box, you can control them using the property inspector. You click inside any table cell and you can select header, but it won't add the scope attribute. That's done only at the time of initially creating a table. And of course, if you decide that you don't want a table cell to be a header anymore, you can click inside it and then deselect header in the property inspector. But notice that when I do that, it doesn't remove that scope of row. It only changes it from a TH to a TD element. So although you can modify a table after you've created it, some very important decisions are made at creation time. So let's just remind you of what happens. In the table dialog box, you set the number of rows and columns you initially want. It's also a good idea to remove the width because tables automatically expand to accommodate the content inserted into them. You should also decide if you want to include table headers in the left column, the top row, both, or not at all. And you can also add a table caption, which is normally displayed above the table, but which can later be moved below using CSS.